It got its name after death for a reason. Death Valley National Park has claimed the lives of many since before its conception. Its history includes death, hangings, and ghost towns. Not to mention, it's surrounded by some really weird stuff. Many visitors and some historians say that Death Valley still has some visitors hanging around on the other side. Welcome to our third installment of Haunted Parks. Welcome to Morbid Outdoors, the podcast that ventures deep into the shadows of the wild. Here, we unravel the mysteries of missing persons, explore spine-chilling legends, and share the most morbid stories that nature has to offer. From the depths of the dense forests to the highest mountain peaks, we'll uncover the secrets that lie hidden in the great outdoors. Join us as we navigate the eerie, the unexplained, and the terrifying. So if you dare, grab your gear and let's embark on a journey into the unknown. This is Morbid Outdoors. Hi everyone, I did change it up for today. As you know, I'm relatively new to podcasting and I'm really just trying to find what I want Morbid Outdoors to be. And so I started today a little backwards. I did not start with my intro. I started with the episode intro. And so I want to hear your feedback. What do you think? Do you like my Morbid Outdoors intro first? And then I kind of explain what the episode is about. Or do you prefer it this way when I'm talking about the episode first and then the intro, the regular intro? Or should I just axe the longer intro and just have little episode intros? I really want to know what you guys think. So comment, shoot me an email, whatever you want to do. I produce this podcast for you, my listeners, and I'm really grateful for all the feedback that I get. And I want to make sure that I'm not wasting time with a longer intro if people would just kind of prefer not to listen to that. And I also think, and I also want to ask you, when I talk about my personal things or outdoors related activities, do you want to hear that at the beginning of the episode or at the end? Some people don't care about the personal stuff. That is totally fine. Some people really like it. I know that for the podcasts I listen to, I kind of like hearing updates about their lives. So let me know. Personal stuff in the beginning or personal stuff at the end. I will save it for the end today. But yeah, you please let me know on these two topics. I would really, really appreciate it. So we have covered Death Valley before, talking about the lost Germans. And so I'm not going to put as much background info, but I just want to say I have visited Death Valley National Park. I visited 4 years ago in December and camped right outside of the national park. It's beautiful, and it's actually one of my favorite national parks, which was very surprising to me personally. It's fun to hike and sightsee, and it's incredibly vast. So let's start off with our negative reviews, and these are different than before. Andy said, quote, "Not a fan of finding nothing in the middle of nowhere. It's like visiting a giant litter box. Stayed in the area for work, 4 days there, and found nothing new after the first 10 minutes, end quote. Yes, Andy, I don't think you looked hard enough. Someone else said, quote, "Firstly, I would leave 0 stars if I could. The views were incredible, the sky was gorgeous, and the desert mountains could not have been more beautiful. The stars at night were breathtaking, and we got some amazing photos. However, from the name, I feel like we were led to believe that we would only see dead things. Instead, we saw a few birds and even some different varieties of plants that were all clearly alive and well. I didn't even bother to take photos of them because I was so disappointed," end quote. So that's obviously, a sarcastic negative review, but still wanted to share because it's kind of funny. Another negative review was, quote, "It's way too hot. People can't survive here in the open air. So hot," with 3 exclamation points, end quote. I got a comment on YouTube about how I said exclamation because I said explanation. I've heard it both ways, and if you get that reference, you're my kind of people. But guys, I'm not like professional word person, so I don't know. Yeah, it's exclamation as I was corrected. Okay, and our last review says, quote, "Words that come to mind: bleak, desolate, absolutely devoid of any trees or shade. Visited here in late April and still as hot as Satan's hot tub. Felt like a canyon-sized hot air blower was on and about 10 a.m. till 6 at night. Driving through it is kind of surreal, almost like a desert planet. Only living things I saw were ants and flies. If this sounds intriguing, then by all means go there. The name says it all, ... end quote. So Death Valley was founded as a national monument on February 11th, 1933, and then it was established as a national park on October 31st, 1994. Now, do I think they did that intentionally? Maybe, I'm not sure. I also think it's really cool that it was established as a national park on Halloween, and of course, it's Death Valley National Park. Death Valley is over 3.4 million acres, and it straddles the California-Nevada border. Death Valley is the largest national park in the contiguous United States, as well as the hottest, driest, and lowest of all of the national parks in the United States. The lowest part is called Badwater Basin, and it's the second lowest point in the Western Hemisphere and the lowest in North America at 282 feet below sea level. And what's cool about Death Valley National Park is that more than 93% of this park is a designated wilderness area. The highest recorded temperature of the world was recorded in Death Valley's Furnace Creek at 134 degrees Fahrenheit in July of 1913. Now, you might be thinking that this national park would have no indigenous backgrounds because of how uninhabitable it is, but actually, a series of indigenous groups did inhabit the area from as early as 7000 BC, and most recently, the Timbisha around 1000 AD, and they migrated between winter camps in the valleys and summer grounds in the mountains. If you're unfamiliar with the story of how Death Valley got its name, this is because in December of 1849, two groups of a California gold country bound travelers with about 100 wagons, they stumbled into this valley after getting lost on what they thought was a shortcut of the old Spanish Trail. This party was called the Bennett Arcane Party, and they were unable to find a pass out of the valley for weeks, but they were able to find fresh water at various springs there, but were forced to eat several of their oxen to survive. They used the wood of their wagons to cook the meat and make jerky, and the place where they did this today is referred to as the Burnt Wagons Camp, and it's located near Stovepipe Wells. Now, after they abandoned their wagons, they eventually were able to hike out of the valley, and just after leaving the valley, one of the women in the group turned and said, "Goodbye, Death Valley," giving the valley its name. Included in the party was William Lewis Manley, whose autobiographical book, Death Valley in 49, detailed this exact trek and popularized the area, and geologists later named the prehistoric lake that once filled the valley after him. This should not be a surprise, but according to the Köppen climate classification system, Death Valley National Park has a hot desert climate. And like I said, it's the hottest and driest place in North America, and it's so frequently the hottest spot in the United States that many tabulations of highest daily temperatures in the country, whenever we have record highs, they actually omit Death Valley because none of these record highs are record high when you include Death Valley in those statistics. Despite its name, it's actually teeming with life, and the park is home to more than 1,000 species of plants, including 50 that are found nowhere else in the world, 300 species of birds, 51 species of mammals, including bighorn sheep and mountain lions, 36 species of reptiles, and a handful of amphibian and fish species. And actually, I would love to do an episode about death, another issue at Death Valley, but about pupfish, because the Death Valley is the only place in the entire world that this endangered species of fish is found, and it's actually found in an underwater cave. So, why is Death Valley on our haunted parks installment? Well, for one, it gets its name for a reason, like I said. And between 2007 and 2024, 68 people have died at Death Valley National Park. Between 2007 and 2023, 62 deaths occurred. This averages about 4 deaths per year, and actually, the most deaths occurred in 2019 and 2022. In total, 12 fatalities have occurred in July, which this might surprise you, or maybe not. The most common of them, like the cause of death, was hyperthermia, not hypothermia, hyperthermia. So if you know what hypothermia is, it is the opposite. People got too hot. July is usually the hottest month in Death Valley, which daily averages are 116 degrees Fahrenheit. So, of course, there's always an increase in heat-related illnesses and fatalities. According to the National Park Service, the most common cause of death in Death Valley National Park is motor vehicle accidents. This accounts for about 25% of fatalities. The next most common cause of death was environmental, accounting for almost 20% of all fatalities. And of all the recorded environmental fatalities were due to, like I said, hyperthermia. Now, last year in 2024, there were 6 deaths in the park, and that's actually a little bit more than the yearly average. And so, why do people think or claim that Death Valley National Park is haunted? Well, for one, there are 8 ghost towns in Death Valley. So the first ghost town is called Ballarat. I hope I'm saying that right. And it came into being in 1897 with many gold strikes in the Panamint Mountains surrounding Death Valley. The Radcliffe mine alone produced 15,000 tons of gold ore between 1898 and 1903. The town was named after a famous Australian gold camp and was home to 400 people in 1898. Several legendary Death Valley figures lived in this town. Ballarat is now privately owned and contains the ruins of several adobe buildings. The town site is located off of the Panamint Valley Road west of Death Valley proper. Another ghost town is called Chloride City. Doesn't sound like anywhere that I would want to live, but a lot of people did back in the day. It became a town in 1905 when the bullfrog strike brought people into the area to rework old mining claims. It became a ghost town the following year, so very short-lived. There are numerous adits and dumps in the area, and the grave of one of James McKay, of whom nothing is known, which I think is very interesting. In addition, there are remains of 3 stamp mills. It's located off of a 4-wheel drive road 3.5 miles east of Hell's Gate or off of the dirt road 7 miles further east of the park boundary. A third ghost town was Greenwater, and Greenwater was built around a copper strike made in 1905. Water had to be hauled into the town and was sold for $15 a barrel. The town grew to a population of 2,000 and was known for its lively magazine, which was called the Death Valley Chuckwalla. Sorry. It's definitely a funny name for a magazine. And by 1909, the mining had collapsed without ever showing a profit, and people left for other areas. There are no ruins left in Greenwater, which is actually located south of Dante's View off of the Greenwater Valley Gravel Road. Another town that actually kind of was launched at the same time as Greenwater was Harrisburg. And this was actually set to be named Harrisbury after the two men found gold in the area. But shortly after, Harris later took credit for the strike and changed the name to Harrisburg. Basically, it was like, ugh, just a kind of turf war over the name of this area. And Peter Augerberry, one of the original strike finders, he spent 40 years working claims in the Eureka gold mine, which is a very, very lengthy time to be working claims. And there was a ton of gold. Now, Harrisburg was pretty much a tent city that grew to support about 300 people. Today, nothing remains of the town, but Pete's home and mine, which are located to the right, 2 miles down a dirt road to Augerberry Point. Basically, like, there's nothing there, but Pete's house and claim slash mine are still there. And that would actually be super, super cool to see. There's another ghost town area called Leadfield, and it wasn't really mined that much until 1926. And in February of that year, a man named Charles C. Julian, who was a very flamboyant California promoter, have no idea what that means, he actually became president of the town's top mining company, the Western Lead Mines. Now, his promotions were responsible for bringing in tons of people. And in April 1926, the town was laid out with about 1,749 lots. There are remains of wood and tin buildings, a dugout, and cement foundations of the mill, and this ghost town is located in the Titus Canyon Road. This is basically a one-way, high-clearance, unpaved road that does require four-wheel drive. So a lot of these ghost towns you can't just easily visit, but I'm going to tell you about one that's very visitable and very, very special. Panamint City was the town, and it was actually the toughest, rawest, and kind of like a hellhole that ever passed for any sort of civilized town. Its founders were outlaws, and they actually found silver in Surprise Canyon and gave up their life of crime to mine. And in 1874, the town at its height had over 2,000 citizens. And by the fall of 1875, the boom was over and a flash flood destroyed most of the town in 1876. The chimney of the smelter is the most prominent remnant of the town's heyday. The site of Panamint City is accessible via a 5-mile hike from Chris Witt's camp, which is located 6 miles northeast of the ghost town of Ballarat. My favorite ghost town, because I've been to this one, is Rhyolite, or it's also called the Queen City. Now, this was the largest town in Death Valley with a population of 5,000 to 10,000 people. During its heyday from 1905 to 1911, it contained 2 churches, 50 saloons, 18 stores, 2 undertakers, 19 lodging houses, 8 doctors, 2 dentists, and a stock exchange and an opera. The town contains numerous ruins, including the Bottle House, which is a house made out of old glass bottles, Senator W.A. Clark's train depot, remains of a 3-story bank building, and the jail. Now, Rhyolite is on BLM lands, and it is accessible by passenger car. It's located 4 miles west of Beatty, or Beatty, however you want to say it, and is 35 miles from the Furnace Creek Visitor Center. There is an outdoor art museum and a creepy-looking Last Supper sculpture painting. So I went, and the art museum is called the Goldwell Open Air Museum, and it's right next to Rhyolite. So you can go into Rhyolite Ghost Town and explore the jail. It's really creepy. You can actually go inside. The 3-story bank building you can see in the Bottle House. It was actually super cool. My sister and I went, and we spent an evening there, and it was really, really interesting, but also really kind of creepy and spooky. And the Open Air Museum is actually super cool. It's a large-scale sculpture installation created by a group of Belgian artists that's complete with ghostly figures wearing white cloaks. So yeah, there's like this sculpture of the Last Supper, and the artist actually had real people posing, and then he would drape this fabric dipped in who knows what. Kind of reminds me of what's that stuff that we used to use as kids that you'd like do over a balloon. I can't remember, but you know what I'm talking about. It kind of looks like that. And once it was dry, he'd have the people step out. So it's really cool. There's also other sculptures and art. It's very interesting to say the least. And here's a fun fact. Raleigh was the largest city in southern Nevada with more than 10,000 residents. Yet, only after a decade, the town became a ghostly remnant of itself. Another ghost town in Death Valley was Skidoo, and it was founded in 1906 when two prospectors on their way to Harrisburg, they actually found gold. This town reached a population of 700 and became famous as the site of the only hanging to take place in Death Valley. So this is what happened. A man named Hooch Simpson, yes, that was his name, he was a saloon owner and he had fallen on hard times. He robbed a bank, or at least attempted to, but was foiled in his attempt, and he later went back and killed the owner of the store in which the bank was located. According to legend, he was actually hanged twice. And you're asking yourself right now, why would they hang a dead man twice? Well, this is why. They hung him at night, but then the next day, the local newspaper, they wanted a picture. So they actually dug him up and rehung this dead man to get a photo for the paper. If you thought people were only doing crazy things for Instagram now, I'm here to tell you this just proves that people have always done things for pictures, even since the early 1900s. And I thought this was a really, really interesting account of the only hanging to take place, and it happened twice. And actually, after the second hanging, the town's doctor cut Hooch's head off because he was apparently looking for signs of syphilis, which might seem to explain his erratic behavior. And it's said that the headless ghost of Hooch Simpson supposedly still wanders the area that was once Skidoo, looking for his noggin. Also, something that's really alarming about Death Valley National Park is that many men have gone missing trying to find caves that hold treasure and people from a different time. I found a legend online about an old Paiute legend of the kingdom of Shin-Ah-Av. This place, meaning God's land or ghost land, is sacred to the Paiute people. And according to the legend, thousands of years ago, an important Paiute chief lost his wife. He was devastated, and he was so overcome with grief and sorrow, he began to think that life without her was not worth living. He decided to take his earthly body into the land of the dead. He's said to have followed a trail of brave Indian spirits through endless underground passages, and that the journey was extremely long and difficult. And as he traveled, he was besieged by evil spirits, fierce beasts, and supernatural demons. Finally, though, his brave journey was rewarded by glorious sunlight at the end of the trail. But he had yet one more ordeal, crossing an extremely narrow rock bridge that arched over a bottomless canyon. But he could see that beautiful green meadows of the spirit land across the way, and he was determined to make his way across safely. He entered the great kingdom and was welcomed by a beautiful maiden who was the daughter of Shin-Ah-Av. The princess took the hand of the brave chieftain and led him to a large natural amphitheater. There, the chief looked upon thousands of dead and happy Paiute people dancing in a huge circle. Though he was no doubt pleased to see that the dead were happy, he bemoaned, "I will never find my wife in the crowd." The princess promised him that he would and instructed him to sit at the edge of the circle, watching until his wife would pass. She then left him momentarily, returning with food and drink to make him comfortable. And when she returned, she left him with one more directive. "When you see your beloved wife, carry her off quickly without either of you making a backwards glance. Then travel back the way you came. The chief agreed and sat patiently waiting to see his wife dance by, and after several days, he saw several people he had known in the past, including friends and enemies, but he had not yet seen his beloved wife. Just as he was beginning to despair, he saw her and he ran to her and spread his arms wide and grabbed her, and then the two fled the valley hand in hand, moving towards the ribbon bridge that crossed the great chasm. But for all of his bravery and determination, the chief risked a quick look back in the beautiful valley, and in that brief moment, he was suddenly standing alone. In the end, he made his way back to his people, where he spent the rest of his life telling the story of the wonders and the beautiful kingdom. And thus, the legend was born, passed down from one generation to the next for years to come. Obviously, that's a legend, but actually, many years later in the 1920s, a prospector named White claimed he had fallen through a floor of an abandoned mine at Wingate Pass, and he said that he fell into an underground tunnel. He reported that he went deeper and deeper, and it began to be a labyrinth of sorts. And he came to a group of rooms where he found hundreds of leather-clad human mummies surrounded by gold bars and other treasures. The rooms and the tunnel that extended deeper into the catacombs were lit with a pale greenish-yellow light of unknown origin. However, White did not follow the tunnel deeper into the unknown. He claimed that he explored the catacombs 2 more times after his initial find, and during his second visit, he was accompanied by his wife, and on his third, by another prospector partner named Fred Thomason. Now, of course, White's story got around, and a local Paiute indigenous person named Tom Wilson, he actually worked as a trapper and a guide in the area, and he told a similar story. Wilson claimed that his grandfather had discovered the below-ground caverns of Death Valley many years before. Basically, he said that his grandfather had found the exact same caves, and after wandering for miles, his grandfather came to an underground city where he found a group of fair-skinned people that spoke an unknown language and wore leather-like clothing. He also said that the people had horses, were sustained by food he had never seen before, and a pale greenish-yellow lights illuminated their city. Wilson's grandfather made his way back up to the, earth, I'm assuming, and he returned home to tell his people of his discovery. And, when his people and family and friends heard his story, most of them actually didn't believe him, but his grandson, Tom Wilson, absolutely believed the tale. White agreed to lead Tom Wilson and a group of archaeologists to the underground city entrance, but on this trip, White was unable to locate the cavern. However, they did locate a curious dead-end tunnel that had been carved out of solid rock. They were all very disappointed because they couldn't find what White said he had found many times before. But that didn't stop Tom Wilson, and he spent the rest of his life searching for the underground city until his death in 1968. You can't go and look for this city because the area around Wingate Pass was eventually absorbed into the China Lake Naval Weapons Center, and it's now closed to the public. And this wasn't the only time this story was told. Another tale with remarkable similarity was told by an old prospector named Burke Lee in his book Death Valley Men, which was published in 1932. Now, this prospector tells of an underground city located in the Panamint Mountains of Death Valley. And in his story, 2 men named Jack and Bill were exploring near Wingate Pass when one of them fell through the bottom of an old mine shaft. His partner obviously followed him to rescue him, and they actually found what's described as a natural underground cavern. This pair followed a tunnel some 20 miles northward into the heart of the Panamint Mountains. After following this tunnel for miles, they arrived at a large ancient underground room where they found several perfectly preserved human mummies adorned with thick armbands and holding gold spears. Further, they said that the cavern rooms were illuminated by a system of lights fed by subterranean gases, and the rooms were filled with treasure. However, this time in this story, the report of the riches was more descriptive, with these men claiming to have found large statues of solid gold, stone vaults, drawers filled with gold bars and gemstones, and a beautifully polished round table. These two men, of course, took a few artifacts and some of the treasure before continuing their journey through the tunnel, which inclined upwards to the point that opened about halfway up the eastern slope of the Panamint Mountains. And when the two men returned, they displayed their treasure they had brought down, which they had hoped would lure archaeologists to the site. But that goes to say that that plan did not work out. Allegedly, a friend of theirs made off with the artifacts, and when the two men tried to leave experts to the mine openings, they could not locate it again. Jack and Bill claimed that a recent rainstorm had altered and rearranged the terrain. Like the former discoveries in years past, Jack and Bill were determined to find the cave entrance, and they were allegedly last seen preparing to climb the eastern face of the Panamint Mountains, and they were never heard from again. Again, in 1947, more men had heard of this story, and there were some doctors and well-known businessmen that were interested in finding this series of complex tunnels below Death Valley. They apparently had heard the stories about someone finding it in 1931, and these men were retired, and one of them actually was experienced with archaeological excavations, so they actually planned to go together to find this place. Dr. F. Bryce Russell, he was an Ohio physician, and he's the one that was retired, and while they were trying to accomplish their mission, he reportedly moved west for his health and decided to check out mining opportunities. According to the tale, while he was sinking a shaft for a mining claim, he fell into a cave when the soil gave way, and he discovered a catacomb of tunnels leading in different directions. Again, people said that they found mummified remains of 3 gigantic men, like 8 to 9 feet tall. These giants were clothed in garments consisting of medium-length jacket and trousers that extended slightly below their knees. They believed that this clothing was sheepskin, but actually, they then said that maybe it was taken from an animal unknown today. They said that the room held artifacts that resembled Egyptian and American Indian designs, and that hieroglyphics were chiseled on carefully polished granite. So the explorers believed they had found the burial place of the tribe's hierarchy. Going further into the tunnels, they have found apparently preserved remains of animals, including dinosaurs, elephants, and tigers. And later, it would be suggested that perhaps these bones belonged to ancient saber-toothed tigers and mammoths. This Dr. Russell said there were at least 32 tunnels and estimated that they ran across 180 square miles in Death Valley and other parts of southern Nevada. So, of course, when people heard this story, a lot of people were skeptical, and they actually wanted to check it out personally, especially a group of archaeologists from Los Angeles County Museum. And despite the scientists' disinterest, them not believing him, Dr. Russell and a group of investors created a corporation called Amazing Explorations Incorporated to handle the release and hopefully the profit from this remarkable find. Now, when Dr. Russell took these people out to find the caves and tunnels, he couldn't find it. And I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. But this was very concerning because afterwards he disappeared. And months later, Dr. Russell's car was abandoned with a burst radiator in a remote area of Death Valley. His suitcase was still in the car. Of Dr. Bovey, the other guy that was with him, He seemingly disappeared into the shadows far away from this mystery. So, two doctors found this. They said they found all this ancient stuff, but when they went back, they couldn't find it. And one of them, I don't know, went missing in Death Valley. His car was found broken down and he's gone. And then the other guy kind of just disappeared. So I don't know. Was it a scam? Was it a hoax? I'm not sure if we'll ever know. It could be real, but I think a lot of science people, scientists, and archaeologists would say it was probably a hoax. Although it's just interesting to me that over, almost 100 years, people were saying the same thing and describing very similar things. But that's also how legends get passed down too, so I don't know. What do you guys think? You can't talk about Death Valley National Park without talking about Charles Manson. And if this is shocking to you, then you've never heard of Barker Ranch. Barker Ranch was built by recreational ranchers who wanted to live in solitude and enjoy the simplicities of life. Bluth and Helen Thomason acquired the property in the 1930s in a location where they both wished to try their luck at mining. And in 1940, a stone cabin was built that had a spring nearby for drinking water, and electricity was generated by a windmill. So, like off-grid little stone cabin in the 1940s. And after Jim and Arlene Barker purchased the ranch in 1955, they actually enlarged the house to have a large family gatherings. What does this have to do with Charles Manson? Well, the infamous Manson family occupied this ranch for a brief period of time from 1968 to 1969. Some of the family members burned an National Park Service tractor, which caught the attention of law enforcement officials. After Barker Ranch was raided and the Manson family members were jailed for vandalism, it became apparent that they were involved with horrific murders in Los Angeles. And in May 2009, Barker Ranch was destroyed in an accidental fire. I couldn't find much information about the fire, but I also would not be surprised if someone intentionally set this. If you've been to Death Valley, you've probably been to Tonopah or Tonopah. I've heard it, I don't know, the emphasis on the syllables is different. I've heard it both ways. But close to Death Valley is the town of Tonopah. And there's a historic cemetery filled with victims of a local fire from 1911 and a pneumonia outbreak in 1905. Their graves are marked with weathered wooden tombstones. So the thing is about this town, it's not in Death Valley, but it's close and it's kind of really creepy. There's apparently a ghost of someone named George Devil Davis, and he was the owner of one of the local saloons and a local popular character who was shot by his wife while playing craps, and apparently he still haunts Tonopah. And they say that he plays pranks on visitors. If you've driven through this area, you also know there is a super creepy clown hotel / motel. It's actually a motel. It's in the middle of nowhere, and it looks like a horror movie could be filmed there because it's literally clowns. I'm not scared of clowns. A lot of people are. But I don't know anybody in their right mind who would stay at this creepy clown motel in the middle of nowhere. It's so creepy. Anyways, Death Valley is very interesting, rich in history, but also rich in death. And that sounds like a really weird thing to say, but it gets its name for a reason, like I said. A lot of National Park Service employees still believe that a lot of these people are still lingering in Death Valley. And I didn't even include the Germans that went missing in Death Valley and how their remains were found, and 2 other people that was in that group were never found. So there is a lot of death that happens in Death Valley. A lot of it is heat related. So if you visit, just know it is so hot there. You need to bring lots and lots of water, and you cannot stay outside for very long. Now, the reason I went in December was because that's the perfect time to go is in the winter. The highs were in the 70s. I mean, it got super, super cold at night, but you were able to hike and be outside and enjoy it without fear of hyperthermia. So if you go to Death Valley, just make sure you are being very, very careful and always check the National Park Service website for Death Valley before you go. As always, recreate responsibly and remember, sometimes the great outdoors aren't always great. Thanks for listening to Morbid Outdoors. If you're enjoying what you're hearing, make sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform. It's free, easy, and it helps us out immensely. When you subscribe, you get updates on our latest episodes, and it also boosts our visibility, making it easier for other curious souls to find us. Another great way to support Morbid Outdoors is by leaving us a review. Whether you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen, a quick review helps us know what you love about the show. Find us on Instagram and Facebook at Morbid Outdoors Podcast. You can email us case suggestions and your campfire stories at morbidoutdoorspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks so much for the support, and I'll see you next time. And now I can talk about my personal life. So remember, if you prefer me to do it at the beginning of the episode, let me know. If you prefer it at the end, also let me know. I am just here for you and you alone, and I really want to know what you prefer. So in terms of I'll talk about podcast things first. I've been in contact with another outdoors true crime related podcast, and we're going to do a collaboration in March. And I am so, so excited. I can't wait to share more about that with you. But for now, I'm going to keep it under wraps. In terms of other podcast things, like I said, I switched things up today. Please let me know which you prefer. In terms of personal life, I went on a hike today. I woke up, it's snowing here in Salt Lake. I'm so tired of the snow. I don't prefer to hike when it's actively snowing because I'm not experienced with snowstorms and everything like that. And so I have made it like a deal with myself that if it's snowing outside, I will not hike. But I did it today anyways because I really wanted to get out there and at least do a short hike. So I took my dog on a dog-friendly trail and we did a very short, very brief hike. It was so nice. And it's just like, it's so hard to get outside in the winter because I don't do a lot of skiing. I ski a little bit, but I really am not a huge fan of snow. And when I first moved to Utah, someone told me, oh yeah, we always take a tropical vacation in the middle of winter. And I'm starting to understand why, because I'm going to go crazy with all the snow. Anyways, I hope you guys have a great week and enjoy this episode. Please let me know what you like or don't care for. I really want to make this podcast into something that's for my listeners. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next week.